Good evening. Welcome to the special meeting of council. It is Thursday, March the 27th, 2025, 6 p.m., and I will call this meeting to order. I'll remind members of any disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Moving on to section 3, reports to council. We have report TR 1025 by Lauren James, Treasurer, regarding the 2025-2026 operating budget draft. Lauren.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before you is our 25 operating draft budget. This budget incorporates council direction that was received on October the 17th for a notional levy increase of 6%. On the first page, we have the illustration of how this impacts the residential house. So for a normal residential house assessed at $250, the impact is $67, or just a shade under $6.50 a house. Farm based on 400K assessment, $24.70. Commercial, $250 assessment, $110, and industrial, $250 assessed, $149 increase. Similar to the past budget, this model and draft budget before you includes your standard inflationary increases, insurance premium risks that have went up lately on our premiums, as well as our capital funding increase program targets. I will highlight we have received some improved operational transfers this year from the province. First, in the form of improved OMPF, as well as improved OPP billing. We actually received a reduction from our original draft OPP billing that was not in this proposed, so that has been reflected. However, we did have some reduced capital transfers this year. One with the OSIF formula base being reduced, as well as unfortunately not getting a couple large capital grants. So from a capital transfer point of view, has been slower, but from an operating transfers, we've done better than we did the prior years. Council's still aware that the MPAC phase-in program is still paused. I'm hope that in the March and April provincial budget this year from the PC government, we'll see some updated language on that. It's probably too late for 26, but maybe 27. If not, they'll continue with their 2016 modeling. We've noted the ONPF as well. And as council is aware, the Project Ojibwe debt has been terminated and the payout has been done. So that has already been costed, budgeted, factored, and paid out. So that money is cannot be rebudgeted. And right now we got some foreign exchange headwinds that are working against us, both in operating and capital, as well as right now we are in the center of a trade war. Council is aware, and as our department heads, of ongoing increased risk with procurement, as well as trade and trade relations with several of our companies in our area, as well as some different BAM automotive, manufacturing, and agricultural businesses that are impacted. We stayed with the same consultation method in the past, posted it in April, gave extended dates. We did have the capital budget deferred, so we gave extended timeline for that. We also had deferred the operating budget this year due to the fact that we wanted to see what our year end was for Ojibwe and for payouts. So we've given residents additional time to submit comments. So we've received comments right up until, I believe, yesterday, Madam Clerk.
Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got his most recent comments incorporated. Same methodology. Yeah. I'll let the CAO speak now to the public consultation comments, and then we can go into each of the operational departments.
Thank you, Lauren. Just a quick comment before we get into the resolutions that council has made for the operating budget for in 2024 and early 25. That even though the Ojibwa has been paid off, that we have to remember that part of the capital levy for this year was $1.1 million So even though the Ojibwa functionally is behind us and the debt has been paid off, we still have to levy that money and account for it in this year's budget. That levy accounts for what's equivalent to about 16.4%. If you consider that $67,000 is a levy point. So just a reminder to council and staff that this has been incorporated into the budget, and we are presenting council with a 6% notional levy increase. Operating budget resolutions are listed in the report as an appendix. June 20th of 2024, there was a resolution to discontinue the use of the current formula based on square footage for reporting utilities at the SCC and implement a new formula. The treasurer has confirmed that this has followed through into the budget figures in front of you. The October 17th meeting, again, this was the notional target of 6%. Again, this is what is being presented tonight. November 6th was the updated beach risk assessment, and any discussion regarding East Beach or pure capital or operating items may be directed to the appropriate budget meeting. So this is the time, if council so chooses, to discuss operating. However, since there has been no discussion regarding enhancements, particularly in regards to lifeguard capital at the beach at this time, there may not be any necessity to discuss operating impacts. The November 13th meeting was the capital budget meeting. So specific direction out of this one was to include an item regarding shade trees in the 2025 draft operating budget for the Eden Park. Council will note that there is a line item for $5,000 for trees in the budget for this. Out of the February 6th meeting, there were 2 items. So the referral of the sign request from Michael Gold, that was referred to operating budget discussions. And out of the Waterfront Advisory Committee and furthered by council, there was the consideration of an additional accessible portable washroom and enclosure near the pier for 2025, referred to the operating budget. In regards to the budget consultation, we did receive a number of comments. First comment dealt with looking at shared services and how it fared in 2024 and any savings realized by BAM. Comment to that is that there's a report coming on the April 3rd meeting. The treasurer did advise that the savings are approximately $40,000. This is a savings of approximately 0.6% on the levy, and this includes the additional 100% plus service hours in bylaw enforcement. So this is very similar to what we saw in the back half of 23. We did have a comment regarding the bag tag program and expiring stickers. So this budget does not contemplate changes to the program for 2025. However, we do expect a report back in front of council in Q2 of this year regarding the bag tag program. There was a comment about enhancing the municipal assistant budget from 7,000 to 10,000. So the current budget contemplates 7. Council wishes to add $3,000 to the budget. They may do so by resolution. And the tree program is currently in the budget as well for 2025 at $5,000. Clarification regarding the sundry item for building services. Sundry is the building budget that we remit to Malahide for as required service hours. Laura Edwards submitted a spreadsheet, which I have summarized in the next few boxes regarding some suggestions for changes. So to her comments, there have been no changes implemented to council travel or council association membership. Again, tree program is in the budget for $5,000. In regards to some clarifications around shifting of labor costs, there's no shifting of labor costs in 24. Bylaw hours were billed to bylaw, building was billed to building. It's worth noting, however, that property standards is considered a building code matter, so there is the possibility of reallocation should council deem that appropriate. I believe our draft budget does include a component of bylaw enforcement hours under the building budget strictly for property standards because it is, again, a building code matter. And just also clarification as well that non-statutory benefits are based on staff salary and include things like health insurance and OMERS. In regards to some other budget items, specifically in Public Works, we had a higher sidewalk maintenance budget in 2024, so there's no budgeted change in 25. And we have maintained the CN crossing number as well. This is dependent on Transport Canada work. There's been no changes to the legal fees, engineering budget. Even though it's something that generally speaking, we haven't changed, is there as a buffer in case that we need it. Otherwise, it's something that would have to come out of another line item. And drainage wages in 2024 were about $4,100. So we budgeted 4,000 in 2025. This is not a reduction. Drainage assessments were about $71,000. The budgeted amount of 45,000 is unchanged. In regards to service contracts, specifically noted was Richmond, but it's worth noting that all service contracts are under budget over the last 5 years because we've had relatively gentle winters. But weather, as we know, is unpredictable year over year, so this budget is unchanged to provide for operational flexibility. And materials recommended that we decrease spending. So this budgeted amount has not been changed in 2025. In regards to wastewater, suggestions to decrease conferences and seminars, telephone and internet, based on discussions with staff, these have not changed. However, conferences and seminars out of the Bayham water budget was reduced from 3,000 to 2,000 in the draft budget. In regards to water as well, training and education was reduced from 55 to 3,500. However, for cemeteries, sundry interest and inactive cemetery improvements based on discussions with the treasurer, these remain unchanged. There was a suggestion again to increase the budget for municipal assistance. We remain at $7,000 in the draft, so there's no change here. And as it applies to the SCC sundry supplies and equipment, there was a suggestion to lower these line items. However, in discussion with staff, we've decided to keep in the draft these line items the same as previously budgeted. In regard to tourism, there's a little bit of nuance here. So brochures and advertising remain unchanged. The membership in associations was reduced from 6,500 to 1,300. This item only incorporates the Blue Flag application on an annual basis. The reason why it was higher is because at one point in time we were individual members of SCORE, and this would include the SCORE membership. Since this membership is now being paid by Elgin County, there is no need for us to include that in the draft budget. So this has been reduced by $5,200. And statutory benefits, to clarify, to the tourism budget will apply to the seasonal BLEO salary. They're based on approximately a 37% gross up of his salary. Comments about, again, about expiring bag tags. So no changes to the program right now for 2025. However, again, there may be a report to council later this year regarding changes for 26. There's a comment about expanding the scope of the SHF and their facilities management to include the pavilion in Vienna for additional revenue. So this budget has not included additional facility rentals. This would be an impact to the SHF agreement for facility managers services. This could be a topic of discussion when the agreement expires at the end of 26 and is up for renewal. So in regards to some comments from Wendy Carmichael, so council has directed a one-year paid parking pilot. This is something that will be moving forward. In regards to general liability, the municipality carries liability insurance in accordance with its general insurance and risk management package through Marsh. The RFP was awarded in 2023 for 24, and we've renewed for 25. Just some clarification that a municipality cannot run a deficit. The Ontario Land Tribunal can approve debt carrying over the annual repayment limit ceiling. And in regards to the Ojibwa, council has authorized repayment of this as well. In regards to comments about the surplus and sale of the Stratfordville Community Center, the municipality is not in a position to consider the surplus and sale of its only municipal office and community center, nor is the municipality in a position to consider additional rental arrangements with external organization, given the space that currently exists. Now, if we do move forward with the expansion later this year, that may be an option once construction is completed. There are again some comments in regards to summer students overlapping with contracted work. I've had discussions with the manager of public works on this, and summer students generally assist with public works maintenance duties and are not involved in contract works unless on a one-off basis, such as for an event or if a contractor isn't available. Comment about the Facebook page. So council has approved a social media policy. We are still working, getting the Facebook page up and running. We've ran into a couple of snags with Facebook administration. However, the clerk is working on this with our admin assistant. In regards to giving serious consideration for a paid parking pilot, as council is aware, this is moving forward this year on a 1 year. And council has approved a revised traffic and parking bylaw with 2-hour parking in certain areas in Port Burwell to Ms. Carmichael's comment about consideration of implementation of this. Improving accessibility for voters. So we anticipate a report back to council in April. I believe the clerk is hitting the 17th for this one. We'll be working with Elgin County municipalities and Middlesex County municipalities on reviewing demonstrations from various alternative voting vendors to provide council with some additional information on alternative methods. In regards to community engagement, at this point in time, there are no additional communication strategies contemplated. However, there is the option of a budget survey for 2026 when we'd be able to use our website platform for that. So that will be an internal discussion once we get closer to Q2. And for cost recovery of park pavilions, again, this is a reiteration of a previous comment that this isn't a service expansion that we're contemplating at this time, but when the SHF facility management contract comes up for renewal, this may be something that we look at with them. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that is those are the comments that were received. We did receive a follow-up comment from Laura Edwards asking if her comments were implemented into the budget. Some reductions were included in the budget to specific line items, and these were dealt with during the March 11th senior staff meeting. But council will note that a number of those line items remain unchanged from 2024, and that's it for the addendum as well. So with that, I will leave it with council if there are any questions about the resolutions or about the public comments.
All right, thank you, Thomas, for that. And a brief pause while we solicit council for any comments or questions, concerns at this point. Okay, seeing none, I propose then that we go through the overall summary and then the department by department. We have a number of things that were brought up from a resolution point of view that need to be addressed. Let's address them after we've gone through the individual departments and then see what and where it all falls in. Okay, Lauren, you're going to take us through the schedules?
So on the summary of revenue schedules, your worship, council, basically just highlights our net revenues for the department. General government or general taxation is the main revenue driver. And the main rate revenue driver for our operating budget is our 6.75 million capital revenue placeholder. Main portion of that, it relates to the grant here. Beyond that, that's basically covering off that portion as well as capital grant transfers. On the expense side, it's just a summation of each department's total expenditures. It's just basically there for a summary illustration.
I would recommend when you change pages, just alert council that so we can follow along. Thank you.
The next page is summary of expenditures. Again, that's just a summation of the expenditures for each of the departments. There really isn't much of a trend line here. It's when you start looking at individual sheets and you can kind of pick out, individual lines that have year-over-year changes. And I've got those noted so we can go through those individual departments. Then you have your net positions. So which departments are a net loss, which departments are a net income, and which departments are non-tax levy based. As you know, water and wastewater are non-tax levy impact, because They go in net
Or-
transfers.
You went to the third table.
Mhm.
Yeah. Just remind council, please.
All right, I'll say next page. So that there's the summary of the net revenue to net expenditures. Um, Same as prior years, which shows our position. Really not much change there. Yeah. If we're ready, we can start our taxation revenue for the year. So that's the next page. So, it's not really shown on the page, but I'll kind of outline the main drivers in 24 to understand where we're at for 25. So we're projecting low to moderate taxation growth in 25. Reason why is in 24, two of our main tax drivers was a large commercial and a very large industrial tax assessment growth addition. They've already been factored in our 25 taxation. Outside of some houses that haven't been assessed and some smaller permits and catch up. Staff aren't expecting anything more than maybe 1%, maybe 2% growth. But again, that also will come with tax adjustments, farm tax class status, change paperwork forms, ARB decisions, 357s, and all that, like where, you know, your growth gets grinded down with, you know, tax changes and tax abatements. So that's why we're not projecting or budgeting for growth. So we're actually planning on probably being, you know, net zero, maybe a point. So if we are a point, generally we put that into our rate stabilization reserve or goes towards the general surplus deficit of the levy, which is what we've been doing for 11 years here. If we're ready to move off the general taxation, or if there's a question.
Deputy Mayor, question?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just, the plans of subdivision that we were looking at, we're not, I guess, we wouldn't be factoring those in because it'll take longer than that to build. Are we looking at that?
From a planning to a taxation, it could range anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So until the house is created,
Yeah,
and then 18 months after its occupancy, that's generally when you hit the taxation. So
okay,
they're a long game, so that would be stuff we would see in 28, 29 taxation year. Stuff that are immediately have been occupancy last year, you will see this year, but like I indicated, we had two large industrial and commercial, and as well as another industrial one that really grew the taxation growth last year, and they've already been factored in. So, you know, staff do project maybe, you know, we'll do 20 to 25 new houses assessment. But when you have a large industrial or commercial, you can add 50 to 100,000 in taxation like that.
thank you.
Just for clarity for council then, your 2025 budgeted revenue stream, or is that based on a particular tax rate? It's not based on the 24 tax rate, it's based on your
It's
estimate,
based on the tax rate to support the draft budget,
which is 3.5.
which is 3.5
Thank you.
on the 24
Mm-hmm.
BAM local rate.
Yep.
Or 6% notional levy year over year.
And that's where you start to confuse people.
Me included.
Okay. And it goes back to the front page, actually,
Mhm.
the definition of what notional is, but keep it in mind when we're talking notional. The easiest way for me to think about it is, this is what the budget increase is.
So the notional levy is the amount of taxation revenue needed to sustain the operating budget. So when we say it's 6% notional levy, that is 6% increase over the 24 budget of taxation to the 25. Where it separates from there is how much you have to move the individual local rates. So we had to move our 24 taxation rates locally. So that's what's assessed for each of the tax class status, 3.5% from last year's local rate.
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Emerson, please.
to clarify then, the 6% is the total and the 3% is the total minus the revenues.
The 6% is the total revenue created. And the 3.5 is how much had to go in last year's mill rate to increase. So we had assessment growth. Like I alluded, the industrial and commercial, that was part of the 6%, but we had to have another 3.5 increase on the mill rate, the property mill rate that we levy.
Simpler terms,
Yes,
6% is the growth of the budget from 24 to
Yes.
25 to meet the needs. The 3.5 is what that supports that notional growth of 6%. You
Correct.
need to go back to the ratepayer for a
That's what I-
3.5% increase.
that's what I was trying to say.
There we go. See, just trying to simplify it so it's people understand what we're talking about. Okay? No disrespect, but
I had that question 3 times on a phone call today.
I understand that.
What's this number to this number mean?
Correct. Okay, thank you, Lauren, for that. So we are still then at general taxation overall, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions on that one? Okay. Let's move on then with other revenues.
So in other revenues, as alluded to in the body of the report, we had a substantial OMPF increase. So I'd like to thank the MFOA, AMCTO, as well as the treasurers and clerks throughout the province who advocated. And I'd also like to thank our neighboring MPP, Bobby Ann Brady, who was one of the strongest provincial advocates for increased OMPF for rural municipalities. So that was well needed. We've actually seen OMPF reductions for a number of years. The only other difference really changes, and people will say, well, you should be budgeting more for investment income. Unfortunately, with Project Ojibwe off our books now, we no longer have $4.1 million in investments. So that yield is off, as well as unfortunately, we're currently in a rate cut environment with Bank of Canada and potentially with markets pushing rates down. So our yield is expected to decline.
Lauren, you don't account for the one-time policing grant,
That's in the policing budget,
but it's not reflected in other revenues here.
correct? That's in the net of the policing when we get there.
Okay. I thought it might have been actually included as part of, like, it's a one-off.
It's a one.
It's a one-off, just so people understand.
Is it?
Please, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Is it a guarantee?
No,
It's never a guarantee. That's,
1 year, one
No,
year
no.
reprieve.
oh, okay. Thank you.
we can talk later if you want to know the genesis of where it came from.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk, but basically it was a provincial one-time grant
Right.
to cover those wage increases in 23, 24 that the province negotiated on your behalf with the OPP. Essentially, that's what it was. Quick comment, Mr. Mayor. Yep.
Just a clarification as to why it doesn't show up in other revenues. It's a decrease to the expenditure. It's not an additional, we're not seeing that $180,000 in revenue. It's just a decrease. So we're not spending, say, $1.14 million in policing. We're spending, $950,000. So that's why it doesn't show up in revenues. It just shows up on the expenditure page.
But the cautionary note is, we'll see it next year.
Expect 180 added to police next year's line.
It's coming.
So about 2.5%, 3%.
Any questions on the other revenue streams? Okay. Lauren?
So moving into general government, top level revenues are flat for the year. From an operational expense point of view, it's inflation driven and already has Ojibwe's debt elimination already factored out. As council will see, it only factors in 3 months of principal and interest in the operating budget. Beyond that, everything is within line to actuals plus inflated for inflation.
Okay. Does anything jump out at anybody that they wish to comment on or ask questions? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to go back really quick, Lauren, and ask you a question. Or I think it was Thomas that made, I jotted it down really quick. 1% on the
Tax rate.
tax rate is $67,000?
Correct.
Did I understand that correctly? Okay.
Correct.
So if we were to consider looking at the overall budget, the only way to decrease it by a percentage would be to shave $67,000 off of this budget.
Correct.
Or add 67,000 in revenues. So it could go either way.
Thank you. I just.
Be wonderful to find another income stream worth 67,000, but the one that's most obvious is taxes, and that's contrary to what you're trying to do.
No, I get it.
Okay. I have one on building maintenance. Lauren, this reflects the utility cost, or what is the building maintenance? That's line 5270. It's gone from an actual of just under 20 to 30.
That's the reallocation of the hall.
Is that the
and building.
utilities?
That is relation to the doors.
Doors. All right.
The doors and additional, so we were picking up a higher percentage of when repairs were being done. So building maintenance covers like doors, covers cleaning, we were picking up a higher percentage in the hall, so those lines had to get adjusted. So when you guys ask for utilities, you also have to ask for how that methodology hits the other expenditures. And building maintenance is one, because the building maintenance is shared between two common space areas.
All right. I note in utilities where that 5210, where that has been reflected as per the resolution.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else on anything? Okay, moving on then with council.
Inflation driven. It's as simple as that. You guys are pretty flat. Everything reflects to the cost of inflation for COLA. And then there's a little bit more money given for sundry because we've been pushing over 3,000 the last 2 years. So that got bumped up.
So one question, Lauren, no association fees for 24?
That's correct.
Membership fees? Nothing?
That gets billed in the, that's probably billed in the general.
So
That's a-
like OGRA, Roma,
That would flow through general as far as I know, although the renewals for OGRA and Roma haven't come across my desk in the last little while. So
okay. What do you anticipate the $2,000 line item for?
It could be shaved if
Well, I'm just asking, Lauren.
I mean, if we look at the actuals, you were 103. If you shave two, you're gonna be right to the budget, which means there's gonna be no leeway if council
Understood.
decides they wanna go to a event or conference.
Uh,
Like,
That's conferences, which is
Yeah.
different.
I'm talking about the whole A grade of the department.
Yeah.
Cause for council's operating expenditures, you guys should land somewhere between 107 and 108 for the year. So you got about $2,000 to $3,000 of leeway. You guys wanna move it, you can do it.
Well, I understand that.
There's potential there.
It's a potential,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I would encourage council to undertake any kind of training or education that's available. But I'll just circle those for for now. The association one is the one that caught my attention because in the last 3 years of 4 years, 3 years of actual, they just haven't been used. Conference is one I'd leave alone, but I'm just identifying that for now, okay? Anything else? There's been no budgeted for election expense?
For the budgeted amount for that, actually, it's a capital transfer.
Thank you. Okay. Great.
All right, let's go to the fire department now. So from a revenue point of view, we're anticipating revenues to be up. And that's because we have a substantial amount of outstanding motor vehicle claims that have all been sent out for bill. Some have already been back and paid for collected, as well as we have outstanding collections with Fire Marquee and anticipating additional collections from last couple of years of substantial fires that we've worked through with Fire Marquee. To put it all in one fiscal year, it's not possible. So staff anticipate somewhere between 60 and 70 to be collected over the next 2 years
Mm.
through that process. So hence why we have 45 and 22 for next year.
All right.
From an expense point of view, you have some higher training, higher equipment expense, higher vehicle expense. Most of this relates to the fact that the fire department, we have new members. We have a lot of members that are retired. So that comes with knowledge capital training and getting those new members up to speed. And we have a number of fire equipment, both operating and capital equipments that are coming close to end of life. And the fire chief has patched them through until the procurement or the arrival time of delivery would fit our budgetary schedule.
Lauren, what qualifies as equipment purchase operating?
So equipment purchase operating would be anything that is used to deal in the field, but doesn't have a shelf life past a year.
All right. I'm just looking at the actual for 24 versus what's budgeted. It's the
That was the
phone.
phone. That was the phone.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Oh, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. On the building maintenance line, we had a pretty big increase from 2023 to 2024. And we've budgeted pretty much the 17,000 again for this year. What's the difference? Like, there's like an $8,000 difference there.
So we had additional repairs and maintenance to Strathville Hall. And that building it's older, so it has issues with doors. We've had doors come out there and we've had electrical. Basically, our biggest thing is we have buildings that need upkeep. So because we don't have, a defined building manager who can constantly do this, when stuff goes, we pay a premium to do it. It's an impact that impacts all departments. In prior years, you had Public Works that had high building expense maintenance because of their doors. Doors, unfortunately, can be a premium. The doors here have been, in the past, our front doors have been expensive getting repairs work done. So that, that translates to that.
Supplementary through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Just, I apologize. I'm having a moment here. The upgrades that are happening are as a result of a grant, correct? Or was that an application that we made for the changes to the Stratfordville Hall?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, there was a fire protection grant that was received as a part of their cancer prevention stream that affects both the Stratfordville Fire Hall and the Burwell Fire Hall. And the fire chief is here if you have any further comments on that.
I'm just clarifying that is any of that out of our pocket? Is that included in this budget or is that 100% covered?
So at the time of the draft of the budget, so we've received 2 grants, the fire operating grant of 50K and the emergency or preparedness grant of 16.
Right.
It's revenue in with expense out. It can't be used to underwrite the levy or reduce the levy. It's basically going to be defined expense that relates to it. And that's not factored in here because
It's not, okay,
because it's going to be a net zero.
gotcha. Okay, no, I just wasn't sure if that was part of this.
The great thing about those programs and councils work, we've already been funded.
Right,
Just quickly to clarify, you got the numbers backwards, Lauren. The fire protection grant is a 16 and change and the emergency one is 50. So
thank you, sorry, thank you, chief.
Councilor Emerson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's not a big expense, but I just kind of wondering what's the difference between emergency operations center supplies and office supplies. And why do they go up double and ninefold from year to year? We use that much more paper or what?
So you're looking at emergency operations center supplies, account 2010-5150.
And 70. So,
And what's the other one you said, Councilor Emerson?
5150, 5170.
Oh, here.
Thank you. I'll take a stab at this one. Harry, Lauren, jump in if you wish to. So the emergency operations center supplies is something that we would incur if we have stood up the EOC for an emergency, or we're replenishing supplies that we would need for an administrative perspective for emergencies, whereas standard office supplies would be outside of EOC operation. The reason why we've gone from 500 to 4,500 for the EOC supplies is based upon last 4 years of actuals, where we're looking between 3,800 and approximately $4,300 in actual expenditures. So we're right sizing the 2025 budget to those actuals.
Okay, thank you.
And the same with the office expense as well.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Any further questions in fire?
Not seen any, Lauren. Well, Fire Pro software. I mean, it's it's not a big deal, but you budget $4,000, you spend $2,300, $2,800.
It's American. I have to renew it, and I don't know what the renewal fee will be yet.
Mm.
All right.
And
Very
that
good.
was a multi-year service one.
Okay. Thank you.
Would be good to keep it there.
You just don't know.
Could be $1.50 when I go and buy it. I don't know what the exchange will be. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Okay, gonna take us over to police services?
We'll go to police services. So let's start with the revenue, and then we can get back to the worship's comment about the billing. So
Right.
POA, we actually received nothing in 24,
Hmm.
and that was to the timing of our year end. I wasn't able to get a number out of the county for accrual. This week, we just got notified that we're receiving over 10,000 from the county for 24, which will be in our 25. So if council wanted to, they could increase the POA line to 12,500 or to 12,000 if they wanted to add 10. Okay. Beyond that, now moving into the expenditure line, we have 965. Going into next year's budget, yes, I have 970 there. Until we actually get the billing statement in September, I won't put a number there, but council should anticipate a minimum of 180 on that number. So we're looking at a 1,150,000
That's on the 26th.
on the 26th.
Yes. So that's where that wash on that police
Mm.
grant takes place.
So our service contract shows a net of the one-time reduction less the standardized billing. And again, that reflects to multiple years of collectives now coming up on the OPP service rates.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Fees and services. Can you break it down? What does that include?
That is our shared service fee that we get billed from Central Elgin.
Ah. Thank you.
For the police board? No,
The prisoner transfer.
prisoner transfers. Thank you. All right.
And I would not move that 15 down
No.
because Central only billed us for 5, and they probably have some lagging billing behind. So we're probably gonna land between 12.5 and 15 this year.
Oh,
Because if
wow.
you notice, we went 13, 7, no
No,
bill in 13. They
Right.
missed it. 5 and 14. I would suspect we're gonna get caught up.
Mm,
So I would not want to be short on that line.
it's good to know.
Anything else on police?
And the other thing for council to consider, occasionally we get a little bit of revenue back from the OPP. They net it off our bill. So they'll give us sometimes like stuff for like police checks or costs under recovery. It comes off the net of our bill. And it's
Alright.
less than 2,000 a year, so it's not, it's immaterial.
So your recommendation then, you still got, as you say, 10,000 sitting out there from 20.
Council could add 10,000 to the POA 25 budget revenue line.
All right, pros and cons. What's the recommendation? Do we put it there or do you, what do you do with it? Because that's really where it belongs.
Respectfully, POA has been very quiet for us for a number of years.
Yeah.
If we over budget it and then we get nothing else the rest of the year, you're gonna be under budgeted. Because if you look at it, we did 5, 5, 2. When I first
So-
started here, we used to do 75 to 35,000 a year. It has been
Wow,
whittled very fast.
why is that?
Wow.
It relates to a bunch of cost structures that now take a portion of the revenues. Yeah.
So what are you recommending that you do with that 10K? Drop it in general government or what?
I would keep it as a tally sheet. We've already recognized 2, recognized 10. If council was looking to
Hmm.
bring it down, we could put it as a side sheet to say these are some items that come back. Each of those items that have already been identified, the 2 and the 10, do come with some risk. Council's looking to bring it down from 6. Some of these cuts could still be underfunded. That's my word of caution.
Understood that.
Mhm.
Still didn't answer my question. What do you want to do with that revenue stream?
Put it in the revenue or not, or leave it as a flow.
Leave it as a float.
Okay, so how, where do you account for it in your,
It'll be part of the year-end actuals, and either it goes against the surplus or deficit of the operations.
all right. Does that make sense to council?
Yep.
All right, that answers the question. Thank you, Lauren. Conservation Authority,
Inflationary based and set based on LPRCA's budget. There's no movement on this one. The only thing that council consideration is, we brought back the tree program for 5,000.
right,
It's the only discretionary in this whole budget if council wants to discuss whether they want to bring back the tree program at 5. Council can see in 21 to 23, we did between 3 to 4,100.
Mhm.
We did not have the tree program in 24. We removed that. If council so wishes to keep it or remove it, it's at your discretion.
all right.
But I
Thank you
know
for
some
that.
of our residents have enjoyed using it and some were disappointed that we didn't have the program last year.
Okay, it's identified. All right. Thank you. And just to make the note that this is a return for program. It does not,
Doesn't expand it from the previous program. It's
No.
just the return.
but the other 5,000 you've identified later in the budget in parks is for the Eden.
The shade request at council.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just to distinguish the two. Any questions on that? Building services.
Top line revenue, I'm expecting a bit of slower growth in 25 compared to 24 actuals. A little bit uncertainty right now in the economic landscape. Moving into expenditures, a couple things for council to note. We factored in staff that was in general government moving over to support building services as intake and support. So that payroll's been moved over as well as the corresponding statutory and non-statutory. And a portion of the bylaw officer's time is been moved over here, which is approximately 20%. And then a little bit higher for the sundry for Malahide due to timing of billing of 24 to 25. That's why if you look at actuals for 24, it's 102, budget is 157. It was timing of a bill in 24 that got cut off of our year end.
All right, 20% for bylaw. That's what you're saying.
So yes, 20% for bylaw enforcement. Property standards is a bylaw that we commonly receive complaints about and falls under bylaw enforcement operations. Property standards, however, is a building code matter, and that's why we have a property standards committee that falls under the Building Code Act. So 20% of the bylaw enforcement officer's time has been shifted over to building to recognize that they do building enforcement under property standards. The reason why we've included some of the administrative support and bylaw enforcement's time in the budget is to identify the actual costs that go into building services, rather than keeping it as it has been in the past with just the CBO's time, or in respect to the shared service, the CBO and deputy CBO. We have to recognize that our own staff do provide them support from administrative records and enforcement as well. So council, from a transparency perspective, is seeing what the actual service costs rather than just the CBO and deputy CBO's time. That's why we're looking at this shift for the 25 budget.
Okay. No, I accept the argument regarding the admin services costs. I get that. That one's fine. Is the apportionment that is shifted over from bylaw per se commensurate with the level of activity as expressed from the bylaw officer's report? Like, were there 6 building or property standard issues last year? That's what I'm wondering. Is it equal and equivalent to the level of activity?
Based upon that, it's an estimate based upon what we think might be incurred in 2025. Ultimately, if council thinks the allocation is too great, then we can shift some of that salary and expenditure, wage expenditure and benefits expenditure back over to bylaw. But either way, it's 6 in one bin or 6 in the other. It's going to be the same cost, and it's not going to ultimately change the budget expenditures as a total.
Oh, no, I don't anticipate to affect the overall budget at all. I'm just thinking from a transparency point of view. That's where my argument is.
Well,
Councilor Anderson.
I would agree with you through you, Mr. Mayor. I understand your argument, but I disagree with it because if there was no action on bylaws part, there would be no cost. So I get it that it's property standards, but at the same time, the expense is incurred because of actions of bylaw. So when we reflect on budgets or we're evaluating things in the future and that cost isn't there, it kind of reflects negatively, not negatively, I don't know how the word for the properties for the building services department and reflects positively on bylaw. And I don't know if that's a fair reflection. Right, because the building services department hasn't, and then I guess the supplementary question to that is this how our shared services partner accounts for it as well?
Good point. I have no idea.
I'm looking for clarification on that last comment. Our shared services partner accounting for what exactly?
Well, are they proportioning bylaw time to building services?
They don't proportion bylaw. We provide bylaw services to Malahide, so there's no apportionment of bylaw services from Malahide to Bayham.
Well, through Mr. Mayor, doesn't that complicate the issue further? Because what if it's a building services issue in Malahide that the budget's being attributed to?
I would assume that they would have a bylaw budget, but it would simply, their line item which would capture the officer would be a sundry, similar to how in this budget, sundry captures our CBOs.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would, without having any exposure to Malahide's budget, I would assume it would be the same as the way that we handle building services.
It's just, I just think, well, you'll see my point when we get to, the bylaw budget and stuff like that too. For example, when we go to evaluate paid parking and not all the costs are included in the evaluation because they're apportionate to different budgets. Well, do you want me to still rate it now, or do we wait till we get to that part?
Let's do that budget when we get to that budget sheet.
Yeah.
I've got comments and notifications and we can get there and get there.
And so like I say, I'm gonna disagree with that comment because like if there was no action, there would be no cost to building services. So that action and that cost is a result of bylaw enforcement, not because of building standards.
That's a fair comment. However, if we do have increased number of property standards complaints, then in theory, we're not allocating properly to right size the expenditures in building. Because property standards deal with the state of existing buildings. So that's a building enforcement matter, and that is support to the building function.
I think the question that Councillor Emerson is getting to from an industry practice point of view across various municipalities, how do they deal with that? Is that how they portion things out?
Every municipality's budget is different, but it is commonplace to allocate a component of property standards to the building budget because ultimately it is building enforcement.
All right, okay. In terms of apportionment of different staff positions across various budgets, I'm used to that at the county level. As different staff have engagements across various different departments. And I get that and I understand that. So all I was doing was trying to raise the issue to make sure that it's understood that if this is where you wish to land this cost, so it doesn't get lost, you know, public will look at this particular budget and say, really? You know what I'm getting at? I'm trying to make it easy for people to follow.
I guess that was one of the comments in the preamble to this discussion.
Okay,
I think it's a fair comment, actually.
all right.
It changes the presentation. If you look at our lines historically, it changes the presentation.
Well, it
If
does.
council decides, hey, I want to have this allocation going forward, then it would be, you know, from this point on, it would be budgeted that way. Going back to the comment about bylaw supporting building, there's also times that the fire chief supports building
Correct.
on that side too, and we've never allocated his time to support building either. Or other departments, whether it's roads or water sewer. Sometimes they have to support building on a specifically complicated file.
Right.
Or the stuff that needs road permits to relate to that building, or our large industrial or capital, which require multitude of departments, or a planner, or even myself, who's had to get involved in multiple financing or security deposit arrangements.
Oh, in addition, the fire department assisting bylaw, I don't think we're apportioning that to the bylaw department either.
That's
So then the question is like, why are we doing exclusively for the bylaw thing?
So just to answer that question, if you look at the line called administrative overhead,
Mhm.
that has been our management fee catch-all for all departments before me to cover general government and the general levy that supports individual departments. We've never really functionally tested the time on there. If council wants to adopt this methodology, it can be tracked every bi-weekly on the department's timesheets. And we can track and have actuals to that. This is just a presentation of where it's being funded. It doesn't change how it's being levied or expenditured. It's a presentation. It's the same thing. The question I've got constantly is, where's Malahite's billing? Well, Malahite's billing is in the sundry line, which is the contractor, and Malahite's bylaw charges are in the sundry revenue line. A lot of people don't understand the word sundry. Sundry is basically like miscellaneous or other.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right, there is a public perception and
That's understood, but through you, Mr. Mayor, like if we start accounting for every time somebody spends money on the next department, that's a cost.
yes.
And if things get really tight, one department might say, well, why would I go over there and assist them? Cause I'm not gonna get paid for that, right? And then starts that infighting kind of possibility.
Well, that's possible. I understand what you're getting at. I think it's more a case of hiring the additional or expending additional resources to do the tracking. I'm not sure it's worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
For us. That's all. Counselor Chilcott.
Thank you. Further to what Counselor Emerson was saying, I'm just wondering, what is the benefit to splitting this out like that for us? And then again, if we split it out to all departments, there is the added cost, as you said. So I'm not sure that this is beneficial to anyone except, I don't even think it's good for optics.
Some municipalities implement what's called a service-based budget. So they will not budget specifically by, say, general government. They'll budget by the type of service that's being provided and allocate staff time accordingly. Now, obviously, the budget being presented to council wouldn't be a full service-based budget, but being able to allocate some of the salaries and wages and associated benefits over to building provides the transparency of allowing council and the public to see what the actual bylaw service costs, rather than focusing on just the bot time for plans review and inspections and that sort of thing from Malahide. There are other components that go into play when it comes to running a building service. So that's the benefit to it.
At the end of the day, again, it really has no impact on the bottom line. But it is the perception. It's whatever council wishes to proceed with.
Presentation.
It's the presentation. What's your wish, council? What would you like to do?
I say put it back.
Take it over to bylaw? I would argue that there is a component there to keep the admin side on building services, a portion of it.
Isn't
Or
that
would you think-
overhead?
Pardon me?
Isn't that what we're discussing? Or
No,
are you
we're
even-
talking about bylaw. Apportioning bylaw services to building services.
I thought that was the 5510, the administrative overhead.
No, 5,100.
So just so council is aware, the 5100 relates to one individual, which is doing
Oh, I
about
see.
80% of their time
Ah,
to support it. And the other 20,000 of that represents moving 20% of the bylaw accordingly over.
So that's what it is. It's $20,000, guys.
And then you move the corresponding staff, non-staff.
Yeah.
The only caveat I would say is, if council really wants to, they could put a policy in that all time that other departments support building gets allocated.
Yeah.
That
And
would
that's-
be building, that'd be fire, that would be all the other departments. That way you get a full cost holistic on what it takes to support that envelope.
Understood, but the trade-off is the resources expended to track it.
Yeah. This, through you, Miss Mayor, it is kind of the thing with the sundry, because you look at the sundry number and you really don't know on the surface what it is, like what the bill is from Malahide for
Yeah.
bylaw and stuff. So it kind of, I don't know, it makes it unclear what we're actually receiving and what we're spending in it. I don't know. For me, it plants a seed of doubt. Like, I know I've questioned if it's a good deal or not, but I got no way of knowing,
Well,
right?
to be clear, the sundry item here identified under building services is the CBOs.
mhm.
The building.
Yeah, I know, but it just in general, like, that's like just kind of like a nebulous account or something in a way.
So I would comment back on that. The CAO has a report on April 3rd that relates to the shared service. A report will relate to how much is spent, how many hours was received, the quality of hours received, as well as the savings derived versus contracted versus in-house. So I would hold your judgment on that until you see that report in third respectfully. That
Oh,
sundry is
that's-
just Malahide. It's, and just to clarify, when we go to build the bylaw, our sundry revenue is Malahide's bill.
Right.
So
Right.
they got that line, we have this line. That's it. Where you're getting confused is, and you have other departments that have sundry, that's their catch-all for, home hardware or this shop or that shop. It's not multitude of little expenses, it's one billing here.
Okay. I wouldn't characterize me as confused. I would characterize me as asking for a clear understanding. But that's okay.
Okay, yeah, you had me confused there for a minute because I was looking for sundry, but it's a sundry in the revenue side. Thank you.
And the by.
In the bylaw,
In the
yeah.
bylaw.
All right. Okay. So we've had comment on it. We've had one comment that would like to see it returned to strictly to the bylaw. What's the wish of the rest of council?
Just one more comment through, Mr. Mayor. Like, I think if we're gonna do it for bylaw, we should be doing it for everything. And if we don't want to incur the cost, then shouldn't do it at all.
Well, I understand. I understand. Thank you. All right, should we just move on? The clerk has just informed me she's keeping track of these items. If we want to, and we can revisit this after we go through departments. Does that work for people? I haven't heard a definitive from,
We can put a pause on it, we can see the
we can
rest. of
put
the
a
budget.
pause, put a pin in it, and we'll come back to this one. All right? All right. Anything else then under building services? What vehicle maintenance have we got to deal with?
That relates to the existing vehicle we have out here, so it's probably just old coding and how we handle that vehicle out there. Originally,
Okay,
that
it
was-
didn't get transferred over to bylaw then, because that's where it's used.
No, there's expense in bylaw too.
Okay.
Lauren, question for you. Does it make sense to shift the expenditure for vehicle maintenance and building and allocate that $1,500 then to vehicle maintenance and bylaw? Close that line item off?
Can be done.
Well, if, just for clarity, again, we want this as transparent as we can for the public.
That'd be fine.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we'll revisit then again that the salary apportionment towards the end. All right. Just in order to keep moving ahead.
All right,
All right.
moving into bylaw enforcement. Revenue, sundry. Buildings to Malahide,
That's Malahides.
budgeting 46, last year we did 45, almost 45. Pretty well on target. I go down into the expenditure lines. Portion of salaries and wages, as we indicated, in the building. Same with the stat, non-stat. And the only other thing is we have the service contract for the kennel and the dog catcher.
Yeah.
That's it. So again, this is back to presentation of salaries and benefits and between the two budgets.
The seasonal contractor.
Seasonal contractor is in the tourism
It's
budget,
in tourism.
correct? Because that's where the beach budget is.
All right,
Well, that leads to a bunch of questions through, Mr. Mayor.
it kind of does. in a
Right.
way.
Well, where does all the parking enforcement and the beach and the seasonal person and the signs to drive people to the beach and everything? They're summer and roads, summer, now that person's wages in the beach. but the bylaw enforcement is gonna see the revenue from fines and it like, so is the honk thing bylaw and the parking on the beach, or is it beach, or is it, what is it, right?
Can we pause that till we get to the tourism budget and I can break out each of the lines that relate to that question?
No, but we're on bylaw now, so like if we're gonna hire a person for parking enforcement, is that bylaw or tourism?
We could jump to the tourism budget.
I
That would
think-
show it better than just looking, we should look at that budget sheet. If we're gonna talk about at the same time. We wanna do that, let's go to the tourism. That would be the easier way if we wanna segue into that.
Well, I think part of that is, keep in mind, please justify why it's part of the tourism budget and not the enforcement budget.
Parking is on the beach.
Yeah.
The tourism is the beach budget.
So,
The net revenue of the tourism budget goes back into the tourism and the beach capital. If we
Alright.
have a net revenue of revenue less the enforcement officer, less the expense. That was the reason, one of the reasons why staff brought forward paid parking was to get a revenue source for those non-core asset replacements down there.
right. But of course, and when we get there, just to make sure that this contractor is not simply going to be on the beach. They're gonna be around the village too.
Correct.
Yes, okay. So it gets a little
So-
fuzzy.
No, it is kind of fuzzy and to be clear, it's not to be mischievous or anything, but we got to evaluate whether or not paid parking was worth it after this trial period. But if some costs are in different budgets, how are we ever gonna know if that actually made us money before we approve it as a permanent thing? That's why I'm concerned about, hey, where did the extra parking signs? Because we wouldn't have had to buy them if we didn't have paid parking. And we wouldn't have the seasonal person, and we wouldn't have this, and we wouldn't have that. So if it's not all accounted for in one department, it'll get lost in the works. That's my fear. And we'll get not really an accurate report about the success or not of paid parking.
We can go,
Is that a legitimate concern or not?
valid. It's valid.
It's a valid concern.
It's valid, and
Yeah.
that, if we want to move to the tourism, like, we could do that right now, and that will segue in there. And council can see all the relating revenue lines and expenditure lines to support this pilot.
Yes. Before we get there, is there anything under bylaw that people, in addition, want to raise concerns with? Noting, of course, the concerns with the contract.
There's no concern about the amounts. There's concerns about clarity. That's that's.
Fair enough.
Right.
I appreciate that. Do you want to council then jump over to the tourism budget? All right, where are we, Lauren?
Page 28.
Second, third last page.
Should be the
Thank you.
second last page.
Third last page.
Tourism. Page 28. All right. So the revenue side looks fairly straightforward to me,
So,
except the sundry. That's where your
parking
parking
and
fees,
parking fines,
fees and fines.
fees and fines.
All right,
And if we have other parking fees that are not in the beach, they will be in the bylaw lines.
so other parking,
Outside of that area will be posted in the other departments,
what parking, like fines, you mean?
fines. So you can have a parking fine out of another area. It can't happen.
I thought that
So-
would be under POA.
It is. But going forward, we're able to get better reports from the county, and I'm gonna be putting that in there so it represents it. It's not much money that comes from parking outside of that area.
Right.
It's about 1,000 to 2,000 a year at most, when POA does remit.
So you're gonna track the difference between the
Yes.
beach and the other.
Yes.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, for clarity then, is parking fine on Robinson Street for the beach, or is that for the POA?
If it's,
or any other street in Port Burwell. So all parking fines in Port Burwell are used to evaluate the success of the paid parking. And then does the POA go for the expense of the parking signs? Or does the parking signs go to the beach thing? Because it's quite a sum we're paying for parking. So the whole thing's getting lost if it's not. I don't see how anybody's gonna make a decent report to evaluate whether or not paid park is a success or not.
I'll jump in because the treasurer is staring me down. With respect to the signs, the traffic and parking bylaw is something the bylaw enforcement brought forward. However, it is also something that is administered and funded to some degree through Public Works because on-street traffic has an impact to the roads. You've got a traffic and parking bylaw that before this iteration has only been comprehensively updated twice, one in 2001 and one in 2016. Best practice is to review these regulatory bylaws every 5 years, and that coincides with replacement of damaged or fading signage. There are a number of signs down there that, based upon discussions with Mark and Steve, they're peeling, they're cracked. Some of them are rusting. Some of the signs are fading. They need to be replaced. So some of the parking signage, regulatory signage outside of the general beach area would fall outside of the beach budget. And that falls into the Public Works Department as a general replacement of regulatory signs that historically has not happened on a regular basis. In respect to the parking signage, there's a number of signs, and unfortunately Mark couldn't be here tonight, that are being paid for by Honk as a part of the paid parking pilot. There are some larger beach signs outside of that that are being contracted, and those signs would fall under other expenditures in this budget, such as Sundry, for instance. Sundry also captures the e-bike, the enhancements to Wi-Fi at the beach, and any other expenditures necessary as a one-time to support the program. So when council sees the ultimate report that comes forward after the pilot, there are going to be expenditures in that total budget that are going to be identified as one-time expenditures. And that will impact revenue in 2025, but is not expected to impact revenue significantly going forward because they're necessary as upfront costs to set the service up. In regards to the fines, Lauren has mentioned that we will be tracking those. Generally speaking, parking fines that apply to the general beach area, if you look at the beach zone in the traffic and parking bylaw as the beach, a portion of Southern Robinson, a portion of Pitt, a portion of Brock, a portion of Erie will be identified as beach revenues because they are enhanced fines in the beach zone. Everything else will be categorized differently. So we will be tracking those as well. I hope that gives you some clarity.
That I understand, but how many of those parking signs are replacement signs or new signs? So like if it's 80% signs where there wasn't a sign before, that should be attributed to the park. It's like the parking service, right? Because I get it if a sign's damaged or something that goes to Public Works budget. But if it's a new sign because of a new program, I don't think it should be in the Public Works budget.
Also, just to clarify,
Wait, one more. Sorry, Tom. So I don't mean to cut you off. And the same thing, if we put paid parking in and somebody is over by the public school parking illegally and gets a ticket, that's because of the paid parking. That's not because, so how do you, because everybody's going to look for a place to park for free. So parking tickets will go up because of the paid parking and they won't be attributed to the right place.
So respectfully, if the beach revenue is down at the beach, it's gonna be in the right place. If there's parking that's outside of the beach defined area, that would be still getting bylaw enforced right now with the current bylaw officer. So if the seasonal picks up somebody outside the area, we will do our best when we get the reconciliation from the county to put it to bylaw as bylaw revenue. I totally understand what you're saying, because you want to have the bylaw lines here, you want to have the expenditures here, and you want to have all the stuff, the lines. It can be done. The comment about the signs, that's going to be done every time we procure a sign. both the two department heads, Public Works and Ballard, are gonna be reviewing the invoices before they come to finance to get coded. So they're gonna be looking at the number of cedars, okay, this is for these signs, they're gonna be looking at each of the signs. Cause this, like, as indicated, this is also replacement of age of signs. Also, as you indicated, new signs being installed should not be attributed to Public Works, as you indicated. So again, that's at the discretion of the two department heads to code it at the time. Finance will do our best to review it to make sure it's allocated, but it's gonna be at the department heads to mark it out. So if they mark X here, that's in that jurisdiction, that would be beach and correspondingly. You are right, there could be issues of misposting or misallocation. Again, when the report comes, staff can review everything that gets posted in the GLs to make sure nothing is missed. And do a comprehensive review of department heads as well,
Right.
or a report comes back. Because
Is-
it does happen, there mispostings can happen.
But through you, I didn't make the comment that fines will pay for the signs. Right?
That
So
was a
how do I know with the fines come that the fines paid for the signs or not? I didn't make the statement,
Well,
right?
I believe honestly that without speaking for staff, but my interpretation is that was a misstatement. I think the intention was that the fees for parking would pay for the signs for the beach.
It is the fees, yes, and we'd have to front run the cost for signage that of our own expenditures. The hope would be that the fine revenue would then help offset those costs. So the fines and the parking revenue, which is why we have to track both. Back to your comment, Councilor Emerson, about signs, fair comment that we probably do need more signs to support the enhanced traffic and parking bylaw. Some of those are going to be directly for beach enforcement. Some of those are going to be for Port Burwell general enforcement. If you assume that, you're looking at $10,000 in regulatory signs, call it 70% of those are brand new, call it $7,000. But again, like the sundry costs to establish the service, those would be one-time costs. So the report that comes forward is going to be looking at one time to establish the service, and then is going to focus on what are going to be the recurring expenditures versus the recurring revenue to see if this is year over year productive. So council is going to have to be cognizant of what is a front end cost to establish the service and what can we expect to continue year over year once established.
Otherwise, you would amortize the cost of those signs over the lifetime of those signs for the final.
Like a
Yeah, that would
5
be,
years
that
type
would
of-
be amortization costs. Like I agree with that, but the project, I'm not making these statements to be rude, but the project is going to be controversial. So when it comes time to review, the report has to be clear and without question.
Absolutely.
No
And
doubt.
staff have had some ongoing discussions about this between bylaw, Public Works and the treasurer, and we'll do the best job that we can to break out the cost so a clear report comes back in Q4.
So in that, we have to make sure that expenditures are put into the right budgets before we start this thing.
True. And as you had mentioned, Thomas, front running some of these costs out of, I would assume they have to come out of Public Works. I would hope that that budget would be reimbursed back from that pilot.
Well, it's a paper exercise from the treasurer to do that, to identify what's specific to Public Works and what's going to support the paid parking pilot.
Okay, so
So-
then essentially the signs are a loan from the Public Works Department then to be
Until
paid
they're
off
paid
by,
for, I would
yeah,
say.
until they're
Was
paid
that
off
fair?
by law or the beach. I don't know which
We
one.
The
collect,
front run.
we pay the expense now, and we collect later. For front end.
It's a front run, yes. What, you got a brain ache?
Don't bring me into the weeds, but I'm going in.
No.
All
right.
Through you,
Deputy
Mr.
Mayor.
Mayor, just a quick question then, if, yeah, yours, I got sucked in.
I gotta feel like you just did right there.
What does that do to Steve's budget then? If he's front running those signs, and what if we don't give him the money back?
Steve's budget's supported by the tax levy, which is already reflective in this. So if we don't collect on the signs, it's gonna be paid by the total levy.
Mm,
It has no reflection really on Steve's budget. The difference is Steve's department and budget will help spearhead, get the signs and get the procurement, but as indicated, he has his own signs to replace too, so it's a multitude of Public Works and the beach project down there. Are you
Good.
saying that maybe if the pilot fails and the signs are no good? Well, there's a sunk cost.
Mhm.
There's that risk.
Maybe Steve should ask for an IOU.
Yeah,
Well, I,
do it, Steve.
yeah. Do it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No, but I understand exactly.
No, I'm
Because
just,
we want to
I
be
just
fair.
want to make sure that everything is fair and appropriated, because if a report comes and it's questionable, then it's gonna be more controversial, not
Okay.
less.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
Not wrong. No, you're right. Yeah.
So we should have a hard think, about where we're gonna, proportion the expenses after this meeting. Before we go ahead, whatever.
So to clarify that comment then, the sundry line in tourism is the beach parking only expense.
Mm-hmm. Under tourism.
And that's where all
Mhm.
expenditures, non-payroll will be going to.
So if that is true.
Yeah.
Explain to me the salaries of $20,000 difference.
The salary relates to the individual who is down in that area to support it, to match the revenue up in the line above.
So I thought that was an $8,000 contract.
Revenues 70 in this budget relates to beach. Of,
I'm,
of labor, 25,000 is incorporated in the salaries stat line, and then 8,000 for the relating expenditures. So 70,000 less 33,200.
that's what that 3-month or 4-month contract is gonna cost us?
Yeah. Well, looks like he wants to talk, but I'll cover this. So, yeah, $25,000 is what the ultimate salary is going to cost from late April until early September to cover the beach season. It's late April to ensure that they have the proper training on our system and our bylaws before they get out there and are doing primarily beach enforcement. That's based upon up to $23 an hour, up to 40 hours a week for approximately 16 weeks. Statutory benefits that come out of that are directly applicable to that position. And as Lauren mentioned, the sundry budget is essentially the capture for a number of the front run costs that we need to establish the service.
All right,
So-
thank you.
So that
Counselor?
parking fines for the rest of the town are not included in the evaluation of the,
That-
Tourism.
Not in
no, but in the project.
That's correct. So
So then that's like a negative, right? You sure you want to do that? Not include the parking fines from on the side streets, because that's going to make the project look less attractive, not more.
most of the revenues
I'm
are
for
going to,
that.
most of the revenues are going to come from paid parking revenues. That's going to be at least 85% of what we bring in for the project. And you're right, there's going to be some influence on, having a paid parking pilot and parking in the rest of the village. And establishing how you delineate between what is a beach fine and what is a general parking fine is to some degree a bit of a nebulous concept, which is why we have in the parking and traffic bylaw beach zones for parking infractions. So we can use that as a delineator. If it's a beach zone fine, it's beach zone parking revenue.
Oh, okay, that's fine. It'll make it look less profitable, I think.
Possibly.
Anyway, I kind of beat that one to death, so we should.
I'm sorry, Counselor Chilcott.
No, this is to Thomas, you said the beach zone, can you outline what that beach zone is?
Yes, so that would be the beach, Robinson, Pitt, Brock, and Erius. It is defined in one of the appendices, I believe, of the traffic and parking bylaw. And then the short form wording that would establish some of the offenses, specifically identify the beach zone, and those have increased fines over and above what the rest of the village would see because of its proximity to the beach and traffic congestion in that area.
One more thing, so those increased fines, we already have, signs for that, or will that be part of the new signs?
Some of that is part of the new signs, and we're still waiting on approved short form wording from the Ministry of the Attorney General.
All right. Slipping back into the POA for a minute, and you take a look at the actual from POA, which are principally parking fees, parking fines. So 5,500. 2,600.
The check that we received or notification had 1250 for 24 for parking.
Yeah, but that included some back.
No, that was parking. That was just parking for 24.
12, was that 1,200?
1250.
$1,250. All right, so it's minimal, minimal from across BAM.
And you only get the revenue when it gets collected,
True.
not when it's ticketed.
Right.
Kind of cruel that.
No, you cannot, your worship.
All right. All right, we've beat this up pretty good. You want to return back to,
Please return back to Public Works.
please return. That sounds like a please, Orange.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, that 1250 figure, where is that recorded? Is it under bylaw?
POA.
POA,
Policing.
Oh, it's under policing. Oh,
Yes.
thank you. I was trying to, yeah, okay, thank you.
But you're talking about breaking that out and putting it into
I'm
bylaw
gonna break it out.
going to
Okay.
the future.
yes.
Okay.
It's a internal,
under-
it's an internal initiative that
To really
itself
confuse things.
and the bylaw officer are working on to have it define parking
Parking.
collections of those zones. So it matches the corresponding expense to collect in those zones.
So, yeah, so for sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, so just for right now, though, it's under the provincial offenses portion of the.
It's blended in the
services.
POA
Yeah,
number.
okay, thank
I should mark that one down, 1,250 figure.
you. Mm-hmm.
All right. Public Works, thank you, Lauren.
Public Works, revenue is flat year over year, just reflects to the CPI index to relate to the county roads maintenance agreement. Sundry relates to special billing we do for the county, so that's a cost recovery. That's a net zero. So from a revenue point of view, flat. From an expenditure point of view, I'll just give you a high level. This reflects the current QP collective deal that was ratified and council approved. It increases in fuel.
All right, you went so fast there that it confused me a little bit, so we were talking sundry and then all of a sudden into CUPE. But that's,
Expenditure.
yeah.
Yep.
But that's not an offset of the sundry. No,
No.
thank you.
In the roads department expenditures, the main drivers are the approved QP collective agreement that council ratified,
Yeah.
approved in bylaw a couple weeks back. That's one of the main cost drivers. Fuel, we've increased the fuel budget. Fortunately, oil, fuel and exchange is fluctuating. Material budget has increased because procurement costs are getting higher throughout operating materials. Foreign currency is also being a driver in some of our costs, as well as some of our products now are hit with surcharges at some of our vendors. There's a current trade war.
Mhm.
And the other main cost driver is the recent dust control.
Sure is.
So when you factor in that, it's 100K over the actual 24 actuals to budget, basically attributed to the new collective agreement, dust control, and some marginal increases on materials and fuel. That's it. Not a single ounce of service. And yes, we did incorporate the sign request that was originally in the previous report brought forward to council. That is there. And
Is that under safety devices?
that's under safety.
All right. That's,
The IOU goes in sundry, I guess.
does this budget also incorporate the,
Safety, which line is that, Mr. Mayor?
it's 7810.
So,
Safety devices
oh, that
material.
one. Oh, my apologies, I put it on the wrong line. Okay. Material.
And just so council is aware, sometimes the safety devices material can also have capital expenditures that doesn't get picked up in the capital. So occasionally we'll have maintenance that is done maintenance wise that gets a portion from the capital. So I don't worry too much about that line because it depends how the need is. If we have capital replacement, goes capital. If it's operating, goes operating. But the two are a portion for our safety. And to note about the CN crossing one, in 21, we had to pay $7,100 to fix the CN crossing. So we're moving $1,100 out of our safety crossing budgets. Not an ideal, because when we do get that bill, it's not 1,100. So what I really say about a lot of these budgets and the comments we receive from the public is, I know some of the ratepayers want to talk about individual lines, but council should really look at the aggregate that's needed to sustain each operating department's budget. And sometimes you can be up and down that year on drainage assessments if we have a lot of drainage going or we don't. Or if it's a wet year, we're not spraying as much dust control. I can see Councilor Emerson shaking it. It really varies based on weather, temperature, age of assets. Preventive maintenance is council where we put a bunch of different operating programs in our capital, hillside, brushing. All that relates to, how we improve or maintain the existing road infrastructure base and network. Any questions?
Just a curiosity, 5380 locates.
Generally, that's picked up under the salaries and wages under general. So that's staff time to help with the locate service.
Okay, thank you.
The expenditure would be probably our cost to renew with the locate service because they actually charge us. That's what the actual is.
Right. Anyone have any questions on the Public Works? Just curiosity, if we were to go with that celebratory sign for Mr. Gould,
Hmm.
is that coming out of this particular envelope?
It's already factored in.
It's already in there.
Yes.
Well, strike that off our resolutions list.
If council wishes to go forward. We'd be looking for
We'd be looking for an actual part of the resolution if that's what council wants to do.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
All right. All right. I know we're making you earn your salary tonight, Lauren, but bear with us.
Budgets are always exercises, council. I heard Rainey was looking forward to this budget cycle. I really.
Right?
did.
Yeah, that's what I
Happy to
heard.
hear
What was
what
I
that-
thinking?
Yeah. That's on the record, you do.
Okay, any questions from the left or right? All right. That was easy. Probably the biggest one we had, and that was easy.
Hmm.
Moving on with winter control, which,
And the only comment I would say
Yeah.
back to roads is, roads represents like 65% of our total TCA.
Yep.
So it continually needs to be funded and have the envelope increase to sustain the operation.
when you say TCA, you better expand that.
Tangible capital.
Capital assets. See. Thank you.
Ready for winter control?
I've already gone through it. I thought we were where we were.
It's flat.
Mhm.
I wouldn't, it's flat with inflationary adjustments. The only thing I would caution here is winter can vary.
Yes,
And we also still have the winter control. I would really not urge council to reduce the winter control operating budget. I would leave it as is, and then when we have a bad year, we also have the winter reserve in case we potentially did have a deficit.
what's an example of the sundry and winter control? On the revenue side,
Billington, Norfolk for the portion of 19.
thank you.
And our one contractor is able to procure material out of our yard based on an agreement we have,
Thank you.
and that's a cost recovery.
Any questions on winter control? Once you can control the winter, or the weather, leave it alone, eh?
What's in our reserve? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
50,000.
50? Okay, thank you.
It's strategically there in case we do have that one bad
Yeah.
under our Yeti kind of winter.
We'll come eventually.
It will come.
It's coming. Yeah.
When the almanac says it comes, it comes.
Just don't know what year.
Mm.
All right.
streetlights,
Streetlights,
Mhm.
please.
flat.
Yeah.
Last year was 44, we're budgeting 44. This really reflects the streetlight program we did a number of years back.
Yeah.
The only comment I'd have is every year I get requests about streetlights.
Mhm.
My suggestion to council is next year, when we have a normal budgetary cycle, we should be looking at any streetlight requests and have them under consideration. That'd be the only thing I would suggest. But that's a streetlight capital.
Mhm. Mhm.
We've not seen any disagreements.
We've had a lot of requests.
And it would make sense to put it in the envelope next year.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. Moving on with wastewater.
Wastewater revenue is flat. As council recall, in 2022, we removed away the landowner charges and went to the development charge, so it's kind of brought the revenues down. Expenditures reflate to inflation, and we are projecting lower transfers. Again, obviously lower revenues coming in, and these are all set to the current rates and fees that are set in 25.
Right.
But as council can see, we have had healthy reserve transfers, 422, 384, 295, 258. Unfortunately for this budget exercise, we're projecting just a shade under 200,000. So, and a lot of this also will have vary based on materials procured, some of it coming from Europe and some of it coming from America. And potentially it could have exchange or surcharge. Hopefully there's not goods that are being the round of retaliatory tariffs. And also set based on our water rate water model as well.
All right, any concerns on the wastewater budget as presented? Got away with a light year last year on systems maintenance, or is that simply a timing?
Timing.
Thank you.
Where is it?
Yeah, well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything to highlight then on the water side?
Water side, same thing, revenue is lower again because we brought in the development charges.
Yeah.
Matches the current rates. We will see some revenue increases, but that's basically for that growth. Related to the rates. Reserve transfers have been better the last couple of years. As council's where we had a reserve transfer of 111,000 compared to our projected budgeted of 41. A lot of it just depends on we have any water main breaks, and two, how some of our testing and material supplies goes with procurement. Again, there's a little bit of subjectivity with foreign exchange and product availability. But Ed runs the water and wastewater very tight, so it's a net. It has no impact to the levy. It's a matter of how big is our transfer going to be for the year end.
Mhm.
Again, as you indicated, it has no impact on the levy. You budget pretty heavy for utilities, but don't seem to expend them.
I generally budget heavier based on peak service and other conditions. So sometimes utilities can have peak years. Again, if we're a little bit over on the line, this means we have a higher transfer.
Yes.
The main caveat is we have set the water and wastewater rates. So it's a matter of what is our year-end transfer number going to be.
Okay. Any questions from anyone?
Ready to move to Richmond? Same thing, revenues are flat. We added one new house last year in Richmond. So there's not going to be projected many more users in that village or hamlet. The DC is no longer applicable. It goes to this DC reserve, so it doesn't hit the operating anymore. And the only big thing is the last couple of years, we were able to get source water grants as well as the expenditures. And we've been able to have a healthy reserve transfer. Last year, we had a reserve transfer of 47,000 for this individual system, which goes into Waterworks Reserve. Again, no levy impact. And it's also, the rates are set based on the water rate model that council adopted.
All right. Lauren, are you apportioning enough in the budget for the administrative overhead?
The administrative overhead relates to finance supporting it through billing.
That's what I'm getting at.
It might be a touch light. I mean, we can look at it and see how the quarter goes and adjust the transfer. If this is an exercise that council wants to have, that we look at the management fee or the min transfer departments, this is something that we're prepared to. It's been a long time since we've done that.
I
I
understand.
don't have a problem with that. It's just, it comes down to time tracking. So sometimes, you know, on a 2 month set schedule, you can have one finance person focus 4 days. And the rest of it could be anywhere between 10 minutes and 30 minutes a day for the course of those 2 months. Inquiries, collections, or other stuff like that are supporting, you know, meters broken or service requests. So it's a matter of how much of this do we want to be costed.
Okay,
Comes with time.
okay. Any questions with Richmond, or are we comfortable moving forward then with waste management?
All right, so talking the waste management budget. So no longer do we get the RPPRA grants, the MRF no longer exists. And our two main revenues are bag tags, which are still $2. And our large item pickup, which is $25. The large item has consistently been well subscribed. It hasn't got past the typical number of users for each of the cycle. I wish it would increase so we can get some more cost benefits across. And then the other big driver is we have more waste tonnage.
Hmm.
And we've increased the expenditure in the public space recycling for more outlets, which has been a concern and complaint at some of our public spaces. The only item for this budget to consider, as Thomas alluded, was bringing back a waste report, which he alluded to in the public consultation comments.
Right.
Yeah, but just to clarify, that would be for 2026. That won't be for 2025.
Any questions from members of council? Concerns? Turning the page. Cemeteries.
Cemeteries, it's a pretty flat and quiet budget, no pun intended. Uh,
Yikes, yikes, yikes.
Sorry, I had to get a smile out of you guys. Sundry relates to the cemeteries that no longer have boards that we actively manage. So that's like locates,
Yes.
interment rights, you name it, ground maintenance. We do have some additional expenditures happening that year. And then we have the sundry, which is the interest expense guarantee for the boards for the care and maintenance, and inactive. And luckily, we have not had a large expense in one of the inactive, but we will have that day coming one day when we have ice or tree damage that takes out the fence line or does stone damage.
Agreed. I think it's prudent to keep that small. You know,
It's not really well.
no. And again, looking at your actuals for 24, it's a timing thing. Just hasn't been reported in. All right, thank you. Municipal assistance.
Same thing, flat,
Flat.
7,000 envelope provided again in 25. Public comments for to increase the envelope. If you look at it, the last couple of years, we've been between 5 and 6. If council recalls, we actually gave additional money at the year end to top that up to the school program. That's the only item that, you know, council would consider if you guys want to add that. But generally, we have the same groups, associations apply. But Megan can speak to it because that's her lane if she wants to.
I don't think she wants to.
I don't think so either.
Just to speak to that, applications are open and they've been submitted and a report will come after the budget's approved.
Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I thought last year we had oversubscribed, so we
do.
decreased the amount that we allowed. And, you know, I was thinking about, you know, after reading some of the comments and looking at the budget piece, if you adjusted the tree program a little bit to increase this envelope a little bit, like, because we've put the tree program back in at 5,000, what if we capped it at a 3,000 for trees and put 2,000 over here? That would increase this one to 9,000, and then that way we would have been able to meet all of those applications at full budget from last year.
To be clear.
Hmm.
We funded more as,
That's
but
right.
apportioned it to smaller pieces.
Correct,
All right,
right.
to be clear, that's what we did. And I would look to Steve, time for to put you on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
When the tree program was up and running, it was fairly well subscribed to, if I recall.
30.
Yeah,
3,800 was the most we spent.
Absolutely, through your
Mhm.
worship. I think the last couple of years we saw our full funding in the end get utilized, because I think the last year we ended up cutting back, or we had to take amounts away from registers from 3 to 2 trees because of that, just to get more applicants.
Yeah.
However, in the parks, we did add the tree program as well. That could be another option, to reduce, work on 1 park per year. Currently, the wage that's in there now, because I do have outlined 2 parks that could use these larger trees that were brought forward. So I would consider either of those. Absolutely.
okay.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, both programs are well utilized then, like everything's full. So I guess, if we're not, why can't we consider just raising the total? Because I anticipate
Mhm.
more groups asking for the money instead of less, and then we'll just have less desirable community events to go to if we don't want to fund, if we're gonna start apportioning it.
Compromise to that, we've already identified 2,000 to 3,000 in council. Council wants to take that off their budget and put it to community municipal assistance. There's your $3,000.
Council budget, Lauren?
Yeah,
Council
remember
budget, the
we identified
2,000.
that.
Yes, that'd be the 2,000 from associations and memberships we reapportioned.
Well, there's an idea right there, because
Yeah,
again,
well,
this is
amenable to
one,
that.
that is one that hasn't been utilized, and it's funded under general government anyway.
And the only other thing I would take in consideration is if council wants to know at year end if there's additional submissions and there's still money in the council envelope or in this, and you guys want to fund something that has to do with the school program or food or another group,
Mm.
We can provide that information if, that request comes. We did that last year.
Right.
So, I'd rather have some of the municipal assistance and some of the money that council's repurposing go back into the immediate groups in the community, whether it's the food programs or the associations or whatever, because that's immediate direct impact in the community.
Megan, can you make a note about the $2,000? Okay, sorry, Counselor Chilcott. Well, you've got to yell.
I just have a question for Megan. Last year was the first year that we actually had 2 intakes for the assistants, correct? We had 2 different periods rather than 1. Did that work out better or worse for you?
Through your worship, a little bit of both. We're trying to streamline the process a little bit more for the groups and ourselves to know what our expectations are and be prepared to help them and that sort of nature. So this year will also be a little bit tough to compare to because we are later in the year for the budget. I would speak to in a regular year that it is helpful to have a February date and I believe a June date, because since we are having a portion of the process to be requesting funds, it helps us to determine if there's anything remaining for the next intake or not. And it just streamlines the community groups to ensure that they are putting their requests in a timely fashion so that it's not a week out trying to coordinate work staff to move things around and that sort of thing. So definitely positives on our side. I could see where there's some negatives on the community side if they don't have that information in time. So it's still a work in progress to see all the pros and cons.
My thought was more along the lines of, so you have your first intake, and we have now $9,000. What if it's gone? Then the second intake is,
Yeah, that's right.
you know, non-existent, and people might be waiting until the second time.
Right. Just a quick comment. So when we started the 2 intake municipal assistance program last year, the first intake was a higher subscription level than the second intake was. And if council will recall, we had so many financial requests for the first intake last year that we had to actually prorate the amounts down to make sure that those that requested funding got a component of their funding and that there was some additional funds left for a second intake. The hope would be that any community groups seeking out financial assistance or a financial contribution rather would apply to the first intake because that's when the biggest pool of funds is available. We'd hope to see that in 2025. We did see that in 2024. I can't speak to what the community groups will do. But ultimately, it's going to be at council's discretion if you want to hold back any monies for the second intake like you did in 24.
And through your worship, just to note that the typical events that we usually see, all but one have already submitted.
I will make a comment regarding the reworked community grant program offered through the county. Staff, council has capped the ask, meaning the multiple they'll give whether through a grant would be $2,000 per. All right. We've never had a cap here, but what we've done in the past, and I'm talking about 3 years ago, simply just funded the 3 festivals. That's what we did. $2,000 each. That's what we did.
Right, and I'm.
Last
that's a
year.
good cap.
And that was a healthy cap. But what I'm suggesting is we're looking at a budget of 8, or excuse me, it was 7. Now we're talking about going to 9 versus the county of 72,000. Okay. But that, I guess what I was getting at is if you want to try to spread this over as many groups as you can limit the amount that you're willing to give. But you can't do it this year because you didn't place that limit out there on what they can apply for. You can only prorate. We can prorate, but you can establish a cap going forward for 26.
Yeah.
You do have a cap?
We do have a
What is
cap,
the cap?
2,000.
2,000. Well,
Yeah.
again, if you want, you can adjust it down.
Hmm.
True. Not for this year. But anyway. Okay. So I'm kind of getting the sense that council's comfortable with reallocating and growing this budget to a 9,000.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm fine with that. Lauren, let's move on then.
Drainage. Gained flat revenue grants are subjective to OMAFRA.
Yes.
The 24 actual, we have still yet to collect that revenue. It is still pending as receivable from the province.
Mhm.
And those envelopes are at discretion of their funding program. We've already submitted the application And just council's aware, we're still waiting on our 23 of the supervisor or drainage superintendent money as well. So that might sit on our books for a bit as a receivable until MAFRA pays us. And the rest just relates to expenditures in that department. That's it. Some of Steve's drainage time does get picked up in public works, but does get accounted for on the grant application submission.
Alright.
Steve records that on his bi-weekly sheet every week about what's defined drainage, preventive maintenance, or specific drains. So we make sure we cover out that reporting requirement with MAFRA, subject to their review of the submission.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right. So just so I understand clearly, the grants and subsidy, you're saying we're still behind. This is cash, not accrual.
It's accrued on my actuals, and the budget is on cash.
Thank you. All right,
Good
just to
account-
really
good-
confuse
that-
people out
Let's
there.
just really mess them up with more accounting lingo.
Yes, it is. All right. Moving on with parks then?
Revenue flat. So this is the grant for the public works student. And
Alright.
the only thing we've incorporated here is the request of the trees for shade. And a one-time of 5,000. The rest is relating to the grounds maintenance contract and the corresponding expenses. That's it.
Any questions? Yep, Councilor Chilcott.
Thank you. The 5,000 for trees, that's for
Eden,
Eden. And, excuse me, we're also hopeful that when capital comes out, we'll be able to get a pavilion down there. So will the trees
Up
be in a
there.
position where the pavilion won't be?
yes.
I figured as much, but I want to put that out there.
The additional question and clarification, Steve, in your earlier comments, you were talking about trees for two parks. Where's the other one?
Yes, through you, your worship. I don't recall what the actual motion or was on the floor that day. However, I had in my notes, I looked into all of our parks
Right.
and tried to pick the best ones, and Corinth Park has, and actually utilizing the sun, and the reason you're putting them in there is for a shade area. And Eden and Richmond have open area, and so does Vienna's new section 2. However, something with this as well, just to keep in the back of your mind, that every tree planted also has to be trimmed and
Yes.
removed. And
Yes.
we currently don't allocate, generally it comes out of public works, but any tree cutting is, so it's not a bad revenue line or a expenditure line to start. However, we do have to think both ways in the future, maybe not in the first
All right.
20 years.
Thank you. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the resolution that was passed at the capital budget meeting on November the 13th, the last part of that was that staff be directed to include an item of shade trees in the draft 2025 operating budget for the Eden Park for consideration.
Okay. That's my recollection, and it's included in these as well. The only caveat I would suggest is, if you notice a spot in the park that you think needs one, make allowances for a soccer pitch or something.
Yeah,
You wanna
through
do
your
that?
worship, I think they'd have to be very strategically.
Thank you.
As Counselor Chilcott said, soccer fields, we have a development being developed, coming into that field. So we're gonna have to plant them in the right spot and for future development. With this, I also with the pricing on that $5,000, that's a considerable amount of larger trees.
Yes.
Kind of the biggest stock. So just to note, I also still have and currently have application out for edible trees. This park and through Trees Canada, this park and Corinth were big candidates for that because there's a lot of open space. This was supposed to be, we were supposed to be notified about this at the end of March. However, last week I got a notification, April 15th, all applicants will be notified. So unfortunately, we couldn't put it in front of you to say, we don't need this. We're getting a grant, which would be great. However,
Right.
maybe at that time we can look back into it if we do. Because there's a considerable amount of trees that would also fill. However, the comments for this was for shade. generally edible trees don't provide a lot of shade other than certain nut trees, so. Which was also included in the budget for this reason, or in the application for this reason, so. We were trying to knock it all off together, however, we don't know at this point.
So when you're
Um,
talking about edible nut or edible trees, you're talking about nut trees. You're not talking about.
And fruit
And
trees,
for
That'd be
pears?
so
anything edible,
Like disease resistant chestnuts.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah. Counselor Chilcott?
Sorry, so two parts to my question. The first was, and you start to answer it, how big are these trees, like height wise and?
Yeah, so I did actually, I called a few different nurseries. It's hard. And this is where the cost is.
Right.
If they have to be moved by spade, if you want shade in the first, 5 years, you're moving a really large tree. And the spade at 125 an hour, trees have to be moved 45 minutes, it's 2 hours. You're $500 for moving a tree, you're another $500 for the tree minimum. So just to give you a perspective on, size wise. I actually have Paul as well with Long Point. He provided a list suitable for the park as well. So
So you're saying 5 years to get shade, and we're hoping to build a pavilion in another year, like next year.
mhm.
Would these trees be redundant, or is there gonna be a place?
No, I think the trees currently, the park, especially Eden Park has, it's exposed right now.
Mhm.
I think if we were to put the pavilion, there's still plenty of room in front. I would be proposing planting the trees around the playground equipment for the purpose of shade.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Okay. And if you're successful in getting that grant, Steve, I mean,
even better.
it's could even be reallocated to a future budget. Or something else, but keep it in the budget for now, I'm thinking.
Absolutely.
Just add that to your comment there, your worship. I think moving forward with this, because it is, and Public Works probably won't put the trees in the right spot when they planted. However, I think a plan, if this were to come, because there is a lot of trees, I would bring back a report to council, and that maybe at that time we can reallocate or
Yes.
decide at that time if we want to move this or hold it in the account for next year.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I thought we were gonna send out Counselor Chilcott to point out where to put them.
I'll be wrong, but I'll tell you.
Okay, everyone's comfortable with the parks budget then? All right, let's look at the Stratford Community Center.
Revenues are projected to be a bit lower. Again, revenues and expenditures are gonna be subject to the capital works here.
Yes. Yes, because you reallocated some of the maintenance across to general government. I get it.
Correct.
Some of the insurance. Also,
Doesn't. Yeah. Any questions on the SCC budget?
The only thing I would say is last year, the group aggressively got as many rentals as they could,
Yes.
and they are actively trying to keep occupancy and activities in the building. So I do tip my hat to that because they're working hard.
Absolutely. All right, moving on with libraries.
Net levy impact 0. So basically the main catch here is a reserve transfer. Last couple of years, we've averaged between 30 to 39,000 for a reserve transfer. We're budgeting 30 for this year.
Lauren, are the lease revenues accurate from a budget perspective?
We got a one-time additional money in 24 for some cost recovery. That's why 24 is a little bit higher.
Thank you. Okay, any concerns, any questions? All right. Museums, bam.
lower student grant projected. We only are funded for one student. We don't know if we can get a second student. And the operating budget is extremely lean. Curator does a really good job, as well as Margaret, to work with the funds they have and the programs they provide in the community and the children's programs. So they really do without in this department. The only thing I remind council is we do have now the building will be full this year, be the first year with the new renovations. So that's positive.
All right, thank you for that. Any questions? Moving on to development services.
So it's really kind of revenues and expenditures are really kind of a balancing off. So we just need to look at what we did last year for 24 actual. So last year's 24 actual revenue was 138. However, it reflects the new related planning and rate fees. So projected to do 123.5 and a little bit less in consulting fees projected because we're expecting to do a little bit less work in 25 versus 24. The rest of it relates to lines that are brought up for statutory inflation and some of the legal from Lake Shore's put in this budget as well. That's it.
Excuse me. Yes. And some of this cost drivers are based on that level of activity.
More activity, more consulting expense.
Right.
Less activity, less consulting expense.
Okay. Any questions, any concerns?
Tourism, we've already done, so unless council wants to rehash anything here, we've already, went over that one.
Just one quick question.
Okay,
to you, Mr. Mayor.
Counselor?
So the person that we're hiring for beach enforcement is not gonna do parking enforcement anywhere else?
They are based primarily out of Port Burwell.
Okay. Something else was said differently at a previous council meeting.
Okay, but Port Burwell, not just the beach.
No, we said the whole municipality.
No, I don't think so. That e-bike's not gonna be going up and down playing. Councilor Chilcott.
I believe I'm not sure if it's Steve's group or who, when they're out and about, if they see parking infractions, they were gonna report them. Is that-
They have enforcement
was-
capability.
So
Right.
to clarify, Steve and Jamie are both appointed as bylaw enforcement officers for the purpose of enforcing overnight parking regulations for winter control. So that's going to be up soon as the winter control season lapses.
Okay,
Cannot not be expanded then for the
Mm.
Wine Run?
It can, but the intent was that it's specifically for winter control because that's when the first crew would be out overnight doing plowing or, applying salt after a winter event or something. And that's generally when we have the prohibitions for parking on the street because it can affect plowing, sand and salt operations.
Yeah, I was just wondering how we're going to, not necessarily police, but do the parking for the rest of BAM. We've got Port Burwell down pat, but what about the rest of BAM? I think that's what Councillor Emerson is looking.
Well,
figure out as well.
I was sure I heard through you, Miss Mayor, I was sure I heard that parking enforcement and it was for the whole of the municipality, but
It is.
I didn't. The person we're hiring, but now it's primarily the beach zone at Port Burwell.
Person that we're hiring to do seasonal bylaw enforcement is primarily based at a Port Burwell. He will probably be outside of Port Burwell for training and for that sort of stuff before the beach season really starts. The traffic and parking bylaw applies to the entire municipality, and we have another bylaw enforcement for that. We expect most of the parking infractions, however, to be in Port Burwell.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
We ready to look at the capital, net
Yes.
capital?
we're looking.
Okay, so last year's net capital from the tax levy was 1.8 million. The 24 actual was 2.4, and that's because we had additional operating surpluses. So that amount got portioned over. This year's net tax capital levy is 2.369 million. Of that, 1.1 was Ojibwe,
Right.
and that is the budget. So now we want to come back to any of the points for the amendments to the budget. Let's do that.
Questions on the capital?
Wait,
before we do that?
Thomas wants to.
Oh, let's do capital first. Questions and I'll jump in.
Capital first, any questions on that? Just repeat again Lauren's comment that 2.39, 1.1 is Ojibwa payment. So that's why, you know, the 25, I tried to caution before. Once we get through 25, then we've actually cleared the tree line. Okay? That's what I'm. Sorry. That's why you can't have a zero, guys. I'm sorry. Well, you can. It all depends on what you want to give up. Okay, everybody satisfied with that? Okay, Thomas, take us through.
Thank you. I'll bring in Megan if I miss any of these, but she and I have both been tracking what council's been discussing with respect to either reallocating expenditures or decreasing or increasing lines. So I think there's general consent here to reallocate the council association and membership expenditure in full to increase municipal assistance grants from 7,000 to 9,000. Okay. I don't recall if there was general agreement on increasing the police services provincial offenses revenue from 2,000 to 12,000. That is something that Lauren identified, but I think we're going to keep the extra, that $10,000 as kind of a float. Is that generally how we want to go with that? Okay,
Just
so
a
I'll-
comment on that. So council is aware, council at the last meeting has already pledged the rate stabilization reserve for the SCBA. I would not be trying to take revenue off. If we have a surplus, it's probably gonna go back in the rate stabilization reserve, which got used this year. So I would caution on any sort of, you know, revenue push-ups or expense cuts, just as a, you know, option.
Okay. Getting back to what council appears to be desirous of, reallocating the portion of building salaries and wages and associated statutory and non-statutory benefits associated with bylaw enforcement property standards matters to the associated expenditure lines in the bylaw enforcement budget. Basically shifting building property standards back to bylaw. Is that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is my preference unless we want to change the whole thing and start shuffling all departments around and accounting for expenditures. I think it's all or nothing, just to be clear and fair.
There's no net impact to the budget. It's just 6 here
Yeah,
to
okay.
6 there. So
Yeah.
I'm seeing consensus on that.
okay. And the last item that I,
Oh, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, thank you, Thomas. Just, if it's allocated over there, are we going to have it on its own line then?
What do you mean?
Identifying that it's property?
No,
no, it would just fall under general
Just put it
bylaw
all
enforcement.
Together.
Yeah.
so- Okay.
No. no, it goes back to bylaw.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but
We're not gonna
Yeah.
break it out as property standards if it's just gonna be lumped in with bylaw enforcement. We'd have to break it out as a building function if it is going to be housed under the building budget, just for that accounting and audit purpose. So if it's all coming back to bylaw, it's just gonna be under bylaw enforcement.
Before you, and I'm sensing consensus that that's the way you go. I'm going to ask staff, what's the downside risk? What is the risk of doing that?
I can't think of any specific downside risk. It's merely a transparency measure to demonstrate what the level of service actually is in building. We can shift it back over. I'll defer to the treasurer if there's any other comment.
The only comment I have with building is if building operates in a surplus, you can't have consecutive years of surplus. The surplus has to be allocated to the building reserve. So if you're not truly capturing all the expenditures, in theory, the tax levy is subsidizing a portion of money that's going into a reserve. That's the only downside,
Tax levy is subsidizing or the fees?
tax levy.
Tax. Hmm.
But as Counselor Emerson alluded, you have to do it on a all or nothing approach.
Well,
Because you can make the argument that multiple departments support it.
agreed.
So you'd have to do like, okay, bylaws 20, it's this. You'd have to either set a prescribed or track it individually, which is cumbersome and
Yeah.
time.
Agreed. Thomas?
Just a final comment. There's a degree of retroactivity applied to this too, because we haven't been tracking so far. And given that we're approving the budget at the end of Q1, we'd either be tracking for only 3/4 of the year, or we'd have to go back through various timesheets to then reallocate time. So we have the proper allocations to each. And there is an administrative burden to that. So potentially this is something that we look at for 26 rather than 25.
Okay, still comfortable? All right,
I would agree with
put it back in its proper slot. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the only other item that I have out of council discussion here is reallocating the building vehicle maintenance expenditure in full to bylaw enforcement, as bylaw enforcement does use that vehicle, and that's just simply moving $1,500 over. I'll defer to the clerk if there's anything that she has on her list that I don't.
That covers everything. I just have the codes referenced, but either way, will be fine.
All right, so that's where we are so far. It hasn't changed a thing. We're still talking 6% notional, 3.5 tax rate. Now comes the hard part. Is there anything you wish to trim? Keeping in, I'll make some comments here, but I think we're pretty lucky to be able to get to 3.5 tax rate.
If it wasn't for the OMPF and the OPP, we'd be at 11 to 12.
Thank you very much. That's the part I wanted to council to be impressed upon. There were some unexpected things that happened last fall. The OMPF increase. And there is another 50 million bump in the OMPF coming up this year. Maybe we'll have a better allocation or maybe not. We did take a hit on OSIF, 70,000,
2 consecutive years.
2 consecutive years. Expect another hit. The OPP is only a one-time thing.
Yeah.
And there was a slight bump in net real growth based on 2016 values, but still.
But again, we're not projecting that tax assessment growth.
No, you're not.
because Those were 3 large projects that have now completed and already in our assessment book.
Correct.
So that was an actual great benefit for us to get the number we needed for our surplus to get rid of the debt. So that was a blessing in disguise, really.
Okay, so to balance that off, and as Lorna's saying, you were looking at what'd you say?
11 to 12.
11 to 12.
On the original, it wasn't for the OMPF improvement and the OPP.
Yes, agreed. And the reason is because we are still looking at trying to raise that 1.1 million to finish off this debt. Replenish our reserve. That's what it's about.
And council also know that next year that 1.13 so it's 1.1 plus 3 months. So that's basically about 1.25 is not going to be on next year's budget. That's gone. So that Ojibwe holder that we had for the principal for the
Yeah.
first 3 months plus the interest and the principal in the capital is gone.
Yeah, we understand that.
So that either gets reportioned to capital or wherever council sees fit.
So that's why I wanted to make sure it's clearly understood that there's no way, it wouldn't be. I would view it, in my opinion, as irresponsible to try to deliver a 0. You can't do it. We've got asset management coming ahead and we're trying our best to use 25 to get us out of the woods. Having said that, 3.5 isn't bad.
Considering what we started 3.5 years ago with
Yes.
putting money in that reserve, we're 8 months ahead of the original projected timeline. So again, this is positive, but yeah, I get it. Council wants to get below. But when you factor in it, it's only 3.5 to the normal house. Inflation's 1.929, you're 1.5 above inflation. That's still a good job. And yes, you're right, we have OPP going up next year. OMPF has one more year reprieve. We don't know where OSIF could land. But we also have our debt capacity opened. We have other reserves that haven't been allocated tonight. And there's opportunity in next year's capital and operating for council to make considerations for a bunch of things.
Hmm.
The only way to bring the levy down right now would be to take a reserve off the reserve to lower the levy. And staff are not recommending using like winter control or other just to underwrite it.
Mhm.
Because eventually when you're gonna need that, you're not gonna have that reserve. And then it's gonna come out of another line.
Counselor Emerson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Lauren, can you give us a positive comment for the year 2026, so we can just look forward to having your thoughts?
It's easy. We don't have to come
One
back.
point 2.5 million is no longer on our budget anchoring us down. And you guys have your full debt capacity. You still have a several amount of reserves. You've had good development growth. You have development charges coming in. You've got good lines of different stuff. You have money coming in for other initiatives for non-core. We have applications out there. It's positive. It's very positive.
Thomas, please.
Just to put that, what the treasurer said in terms of how that would come across in like a notional levy impact, 1.25 million. Ballpark for the levy next year is approximately 17.8%. So that's what's coming off the budget, and that's what we have to play with. Recognizing, of course, that we do have a capital program that we've been pushing and that we're going to have to consider.
And rolling stock.
We've got 17.8% to play with.
We should make a motion to end every council budget meeting with something positive.
I like that.
A good one.
Well, geez, careful. Well, the clerk heard that. You can put that on the.
Oh, yeah, but I'm good for that. There's got to be something positive at the end of all this stuff.
I think-
Otherwise,
I'm not giving them ideas on that one.
Yeah. No. Well, I think moving forward, the business of Bayham is a positive thing.
Mhm.
Seriously, but no. Again, we're to the point now, if I were to characterize this, this is a maintenance plus budget. All right, you are have already agreed to move forward and start building some capacity within the staff, which has been gapped for 10 years. And this is going to help with efficiency and free up time for other duties to come along and get done. You've got the leanest staff across the region.
Mhm.
Just look at Lauren. Stretched pretty thin.
I wish it was thinner.
I'm just having some fun with it. No insult intended.
None taken. Probably needed.
The point is, while we are looking at trying to provide efficient and cost-effective servicing, you've got to keep an eye on the future and growth, so that we are here tomorrow, and so the community's here tomorrow, and you're not spending tomorrow's inheritance, so to speak. So it's going to cost you more down the road. I think this is a responsible budget, personally. And I thank staff, Lauren, and all department heads here for digging deep and coming up with a responsible budget.
And just so council's aware, this is a continuation of our lean operating budgets that we've done since we've had Project Ojibwe and trying to do those transfers. So it's not just me bringing these numbers, it's the department heads really getting out there on procurement, trying to make collaborative purchases, trying to front load stuff in face of other concerns. I mean, fire chief bringing forward stuff like the FCBAs or collaborative permit with other municipalities, or multiple agreements for vendors and stuff like that. That we're trying to do the most we can with the dollars we bring in.
Thank you for that, Lauren. And again, this is for another meeting, another down the road. but I think we're going to have a serious discussion around this table. And I know staff do it now. Joint procurement and whatever else out there, working with our partners. It's becoming more and more prevalent today. We had a discussion around the score table today about how do we increase that kind of collaboration across the region, not just within Elgin, but across the region, so that we can actually find some cost savings to do this. So we're working on it, but I think it's something that this council needs to address too. Okay, but that's a little off topic. Sorry for that. So again, here we are at 3.5. Is there anything that you think or wish to either add or cut? It's tough. Last year was tough too, if you recall. Worse. It was worse, but the point was, you were asked, okay, what do you want to do to try to lower it? And I'm telling you, there really wasn't any appetite. I'm not sure that anything's changed. If you want to maintain servicing, this is where we are. Not putting anybody on the spot here, but I'm just looking to see if there's anybody who has anything they want to do. You know what? We can spur this on. It's easy. Megan, do you happen to have a motion prepared?
I've got the Michael Gold stuff in here already. I don't, there was no discussion during the tourism budget or the parks budget about any of the operating items for the East Beach. We didn't have any discussion about capital, so it follows that there wouldn't be any significant discussion on operating. The only thing that council didn't bring up was there was no discussion about an additional accessible washroom and enclosure near the pier. And that was a recommendation from the Waterfront Advisory Committee that the council referred to the operating budget discussions. Is this something that council is interested in? This would come at a cost. Steve is here to discuss that. And that would push us a little bit over that 6%, but council hasn't formally discussed it. So I wanted to bring it up.
Thank you for that. Thanks for the reminder of that, both of you. This budget, does it have a, say, a reinstatement of the number of utilities that were, or porta potties, shall we say, from 23? Last year we trimmed by 2 units.
Yes, that's correct,
So
your
this-
worship. And they were not reinstated into this budget.
they were not reinstated.
That's right. So the Marine Museum, if you recall, and the Memorial Park portable toilet were removed.
So
However, you know, we had no negative feedback last year about it. In these areas. If council wishes, you know, we're 1,000, or just over 1,000 in the season for one added to the west parking lot. And then the enclosure, I think obviously it'd be under an RFQ, but I think you're still probably in lumber. If you're gonna do kind of what we did at the other side, you're still gonna be under 2,000, so for one unit.
Steve, you've been present at most of those Waterfront Advisory Committee meetings. What, and I appreciate the recommendation coming forward from the committee. What's the justification for having an additional unit over on the west side?
Through your worship, I don't really recall during that meeting. It was asked, it's been asked for quite a while now. Personally, I have had many requests as well, because many people do park, accessible people will use the pier and they don't want to generally travel, but I'm pretty sure it was just because of the distance from the general washroom and the portable. That's all I can recall discussing about that.
All right. What's your thoughts, council?
I mean, generally under beach maintenance and utility, where that falls. Currently, last year, I think we were maybe 2 or 3 grand under budget. We can't predict this year,
Can't
and
predict that.
unfortunately, so definitely something.
All right. If you were to place one over on the west side, you'd be putting it at almost at the base of the pier, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think I'd utilize that in and around that tree there.
Yeah.
If we want to think about accessibility, we'd have to probably actually put it by the birdhouses
I would
up in
think
that
so.
corner somewhere and tuck it in there under that tree.
Mhm.
And it'd be a pretty blended in spot anyways.
Well. Any thoughts from council? You want to and try to accommodate that, or do you wish to ride 25 through and something to consider for 26? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to Thomas. You made a comment about what does that look like on the budget?
Well, I just mentioned through you, Mr. Mayor, that any additional funds is going to put us over that 6% levy. It's going to increase the rate a little bit, so there will be a small impact. If we're talking $2,000 or $3,000, that's relatively small. That's 0.05%. But ultimately, it will be over what council provided us as a target.
Councillor Chilcott.
Thank you. I agree they need something, but I think maybe we could defer it until 2026 budget when we would have the money to do it without increasing people's taxes.
All right, let's think about shuffling the deck a little bit here. Steve, when we talked about the tree program, the additional trees, you were again envisioning 2 parks at this point. If you were to get it down to 1, what do you need in order to put
Right, if we're talking just Eden Park on, it's size. I know we can trim that way down. But it's how fast you want shade.
well, it's gonna take some time, because
No
even if you
matter
put an
what,
8-foot
it's gonna
tree in
take
there,
time. That's right.
You know, it's gonna take
There's
some time.
a considerable amount of cost difference between a 14-foot tree and an 8-foot tree.
Sure, absolutely.
So, that is it's an option. And I mean, if council wishes staff to bring back a report to kind of show both of that, I can do that. Unfortunately, tonight's the operating budget and
Mhm.
Not necessarily, council has the option, they can defer. Yeah, I'm throwing it out there as an option. I don't want to interfere with trying to provide shade to a park which hasn't had any for a long time. I think it's something we should move forward on. But at the same token, trying to keep it as neutral on the budget as possible is a possible area. Right? Councillor Chilcott.
So the $10,000 that we have floating, is that something that could be used, part of it?
5,000.
It was the
Oh,
10,000.
10,000.
Use it.
The
All right.
floating, can we not use that too?
You're saying go for it? The treasurer's saying go for it?
Mhm.
There's your solution.
There we go.
You want one porta potty?
Let's do it.
Accessible.
It's accessible, right?
Yeah.
What's the
Handicap
cost of
it.
that, Steve? 2,000, 3,000?
I think annually for the porta potty, you're under 1,100, and then, the structure without actually standing here and quoting it. You're gonna be under 2,000 if internal staff build it. Just the basic, so.
Lauren, to meet 6%, did you want to then include POA revenues by 2,000 and just
Yeah, there you
All right, there's a solution and it has minimal impact to the notional.
Well, again, the hope is that we continue to increase level of service slowly but surely.
Yep.
And, we're getting there. So,
Steve, just to clarify, the added accessible washroom, what tourism expenditure line is that going to go under just for the motion?
That'd be under beach maintenance.
Beach maintenance?
Getting there.
I've got this. I'll send it back to you.
All staff are putting together a motion.
Got it.
Again, one final call. If it's council's wish tonight to pass this budget, you can. If you wish to defer it, you can. But if you want to defer it, I hope you have a goal in mind of what it is you're looking for.
Let's do it.
Okay, I'm starting to hear that. So, all right,
So we have a motion that reads that report TR 1025 regarding 2025-2026 operating budget draft be received for information, and that the 2025 operating budget be approved with the following amendments. Reallocate council association and membership expenditure in full to increase municipal assistance grants from 7,000 to 9,000. Increase police services provincial offenses revenue by 2,000. Reallocate the portion of building salaries and wages and associated statutory and non-statutory benefits associated with bylaw enforcement property standards matters to the associated expenditure lines in the bylaw enforcement budget. Reallocate building vehicle maintenance expenditure in full to bylaw enforcement vehicle maintenance. Increase tourism beach maintenance expenditure line by 2,000 to incorporate an additional accessible washroom at the East Beach. And that staff be directed to bring forward the 2025 tax rate bylaws, and that staff be further directed to proceed with the acquisition and implementation of signage to recognize Michael Gold.
all right. Just one point for you, Steve. Do you want that to include the location of that particular washroom over there at East Beach, or leave it at your discretion? Discretion? All right. All right, there's a draft motion before you, ladies and gentlemen. Deputy Mayor,
I'll move.
and I think Councillor Chilcott, you're willing to second that? All in favor? And that is carried. Congratulations.
Just a quick comment. Great job to the treasurer and senior staff on this. I know that this wasn't an easy budget process, and after council gave direction on the Ojibwa, we had to turn this around really quickly. So great job to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for that, those comments, Thomas. I would definitely add the voice and chorus of council to that, to each and every one of you. Thank you very much. It's been 10 years that we've been working on some pretty lean times here. And this one is going to help us get out of the tree line, so we're back onto the field. And I'm looking forward to 26, honestly. I mean, you've kept services and you've kept the assets moving forward in infrastructure renewal. This has been quite an amazing ride. So congratulations to you. All right, we have a bylaw to deal with. Madam Clerk, I've talked enough.
That was coming for some reason. That confirming bylaw number 2025-025 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
We have a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Emerson will move and Councillor Chilcott will second. All in favor? That is carried, which brings us to the adjournment motion. Someone else is gonna have to pick that one up tonight.
That the council meeting be adjourned at 8:43 p.m.
Councillor Chilcott wants to move that. Councillor Emerson would like to second that. All in favor? That is carried. We are adjourned. And to those who are virtual, thank you for joining us this evening.